Good morning, beloved. Welcome to this powerful moment, this sacred space where your day begins in the presence of God. Today's Friday, the 2nd of January, 2026, and I declare over your life that this is a day filled with divine purpose, supernatural favor, and unstoppable breakthrough. As we start this day together, I invite you to step into the atmosphere of prayer. I invite you to align your heart with heaven, to open your spirit to the voice of God, and to release every burden that may try to weigh you down. This is your moment to rise above the ordinary, to speak to the mountain, and to decree life, peace, and provision over every area of your life. Let us begin this day with intentionality, knowing that prayer is not just a ritual, it is the key that unlocks your destiny. As we lift our hearts and voices, expect miracles, expect answers, and expect the impossible to become possible. Today, we start strong, we start confident, and we start in the presence of the one who turns prayers into testimony. So take a deep breath, center your spirit, and prepare to enter into this spiritual prayer for Friday, 2nd January, 2026. With faith, with authority, and with expectancy, God is ready to meet you in this moment, and your breakthrough begins here, now, today. To begin your day by declaring God's presence and favor over your life is not just a simple act of speaking words. It is a spiritual alignment that sets the tone for everything that follows. When you wake up in the morning, before the noise of the world begins to compete for your attention, you have a divine opportunity to center your heart and your mind on the source of all life, the one who holds the universe in his hands, and the one who has a perfect plan for your day. Every day is a gift, and the way we start it matters tremendously because it determines the atmosphere around us and the spiritual climate within us. Declaring God's presence is more than a verbal statement. It is a recognition that you are not walking this day alone, that every step, every thought, every decision, and every interaction is under the divine oversight of the Creator, who knows your heart and your destiny. When you consciously invite God into your day, you are creating an environment where miracles can manifest, where doors that are closed by men can be opened by heaven, and where peace and favor become the guiding principles of your actions. Favor is a supernatural force that attracts opportunities, blessings, and divine connections into your life. When you declare God's favor over yourself, you are essentially positioning yourself in a place where heaven can intersect with your earthly experience. Favor is not earned by merit alone. It is granted by the goodness and grace of God. It flows like a river to those who acknowledge God's sovereignty and who seek his presence above all else. By speaking God's favor over your day, you are making a spiritual declaration that sets in motion events and circumstances that align with your divine destiny. You are inviting angels to attend to your steps, wisdom to guide your decisions, and protection to surround you in every sphere of life. This act of declaration is both bold and necessary because it signals to your spirit, to the world, and to the unseen forces around you that you belong to the kingdom of God and that his will must prevail in every part of your life today. When you declare God's presence, it is important to speak with authority and confidence. Your words have power, and the Bible reminds us that life and death are in the power of the tongue. To declare God's presence is to acknowledge his nearness, to affirm that he is with you in every circumstance, and to recognize that nothing can take place outside of his knowledge or his will. It is a proclamation that your day is under divine supervision, that your steps are ordered, and that the blessings of God are your inheritance. This declaration is a spiritual armor that protects you from discouragement, fear, and the schemes of the enemy. It creates a spiritual barrier that allows only what aligns with God's plan to enter your life and keeps distractions, negativity, and spiritual attacks at bay. As you speak these declarations, you are not only influencing your spiritual atmosphere, but also your mindset, your emotions, and the way you interact with the world around you. You To begin your day with this kind of declaration, it is helpful to make it intentional. Do not simply say the words out of habit or routine. Feel them in your spirit, believe them in your heart, and let them resonate with every fiber of your being. You might say, Lord, I thank you for your presence in my life today. I declare your favor over my work, my relationships, my finances, and every decision I make. I invite you to guide my thoughts, my words, and my actions. Let your peace and favor surround me, and let every step I take bring glory to your name. When you speak these words with conviction, something supernatural begins to shift. The spiritual realm responds to faithful declarations, and the atmosphere around you begins to change. What may have seemed like ordinary moments in your day suddenly become opportunities for divine intervention. Your eyes begin to see doors of opportunity that were previously hidden, and your heart begins to recognize solutions that were previously unseen. It is also crucial to recognize that declaring God's presence is an act of trust. When you make this declaration, you are signaling to God that you are surrendering the uncertainties of the day into His hands. You are choosing to rely on His wisdom rather than your understanding, on His power rather than your strength, and on His timing rather than your schedule. This trust is a powerful spiritual magnet that draws blessings and divine favor into your life. By acknowledging God's presence, you are aligning yourself with His purposes, and in doing so, you create an environment where grace can operate freely. Grace opens doors that effort alone cannot, provides solutions where human logic fails, and offers favor in situations where circumstances seem impossible. Furthermore, beginning your day with such declarations transform your mindset. Your thoughts become focused on possibilities rather than limitations. Your heart becomes attuned to gratitude rather than fear. Your spirit becomes empowered to face challenges with confidence rather than despair. This spiritual mindset not only influences your personal experience, but also impacts those around you. Favor and God's presence are contagious in a spiritual sense. When your life reflects the light of His presence, you influence environments, relationships, and communities in ways that extend beyond what you can see. People are drawn to the peace, wisdom, and favor that emanate from someone who consistently begins their day with God. As you declare God's presence and favor, it is also vital to remember that this is a daily practice. Just as we nourish our bodies with food, our spirits must be nourished with prayer, declaration, and communion with God. The world is full of distractions, pressures, and negative influences that can cloud our minds and hearts. By intentionally declaring God's presence every morning, you are setting a spiritual anchor that holds steady no matter what comes your way. You are positioning yourself in alignment with the promises of God, and you are creating a rhythm of life that invites His intervention in every area. Each declaration builds upon the next, creating a momentum of faith, hope, and expectation that carries you through challenges, amplifies your joy, and magnifies the manifestation of blessings. Finally, declaring God's presence and favor over your life is an act of spiritual authority. It is an acknowledgement that you are a child of God, called to operate in His kingdom and empowered by His Spirit. It is a declaration that the day is not left to chance, that the circumstances of life are under divine supervision, and that the outcomes you experience are guided by the hand of God. As you continue to make this a habit, you will notice a transformation in the way you approach life, the way you respond to difficulties, and the way opportunities unfold before you. What begins as a simple morning declaration grows into a lifestyle of faith, a posture of expectancy, and a life fully immersed in the power and favor of God. To align your heart and spirit with God through intentional prayer is a profound act that sets the foundation for every success, breakthrough, and blessing in your life. Prayer is not just a habit or a ritual. It is the spiritual engine that powers your day, your decisions, and your destiny. When you intentionally bring your heart and spirit into alignment with God, you are creating a channel through which divine wisdom, guidance, and supernatural favor can flow freely. Too often, we begin our days reactive rather than proactive, allowing the pressures of life, the noise of the world, or the challenges of our circumstances to dictate our emotions, our mindset, and our responses. But when we choose to intentionally align ourselves with God through prayer, we shift the authority from external circumstances to the one who holds the universe in his hands. This alignment is a conscious decision to let God lead, to surrender our will to his, and to place ourselves under his divine influence. It is a declaration that we trust his plan, acknowledge his presence, and invite his spirit to govern our thoughts, our words, and our actions. Intentional prayer is about focus and purpose. It is not casual or distracted. It is deliberate. It requires a conscious turning away from distractions, worries, and competing priorities to center your attention entirely on God. When you pray with intention, your spirit connects with the heart of the Father, and your mind begins to synchronize with his divine perspective. You start to see your challenges, opportunities, and relationships through the lens of heaven rather than through the lens of the world. This realignment changes everything. It transforms your outlook, influences your behavior, and positions you to receive divine insight that is not accessible through natural understanding alone. Aligning your heart and spirit with God is about creating a receptive posture, a posture that welcomes his wisdom, his power, and his direction. Prayer also serves as a bridge between your human limitations and God's limitless power. By intentionally seeking God, you acknowledge that you cannot accomplish everything by your own strength or understanding. You admit that his wisdom is higher, his plans are greater, and his timing is perfect. This humility, far from being a weakness, is a source of strength. It opens the door for supernatural intervention in every area of your life. When your spirit is aligned with God, your decisions become more precise. Your words carry greater authority, and your actions are empowered by divine guidance. Every step you take is in harmony with his will. Every choice is under his supervision, and every encounter becomes an opportunity for manifestation of his favor. Alignment through prayer is not just about asking for things, it is about positioning yourself to walk in the fullness of his purpose. Furthermore, intentional prayer fosters spiritual sensitivity. When your heart and spirit are in sync with God, you begin to hear his voice more clearly. You start to recognize his promptings, discern his guidance, and respond to his direction with confidence. In a world full of noise, distractions, and competing opinions, this clarity is invaluable. Prayer aligns your spiritual antenna with God's frequency, enabling you to detect opportunities, avoid pitfalls, and respond to life from a position of divine authority. Your intuition becomes sharpened, your conscience becomes more attuned to righteousness, and your faith becomes active rather than passive. Each time you engage in intentional prayer, you are training your spirit to recognize the voice of God, to respond in obedience, and to act in alignment with his divine purposes. Another essential aspect of aligning your heart and spirit with God is the cultivation of gratitude and praise. Prayer is not solely about presenting requests. It is also about acknowledging God's goodness, reflecting on his faithfulness, and celebrating his past works in your life. When you begin your day by giving thanks and lifting praise to him, you create an atmosphere that attracts his presence. Gratitude tunes your spirit to recognize blessings, amplifies your faith, and strengthens your trust in his ongoing provision. Praise, on the other hand, elevates your heart above circumstances, shifts your focus from lack to abundance, and invites the tangible manifestation of his glory in your life. By combining intentional prayer with a heart of gratitude and praise, you align yourself fully with God's purposes and open the door for his intervention in every situation you face throughout the day. Intentionality in prayer also involves specificity. It is important to speak clearly, to declare specific needs, desires, and intentions before God. This clarity demonstrates faith, precision, and trust. When your prayers are specific, you are not simply floating in generalities. You are actively engaging with God about the realities of your life. This specificity invites His precision into your circumstances, ensuring that His solutions and guidance are directly relevant to the areas where you need His intervention most. For example, when you pray for wisdom in a decision, clarity in a relationship, or favor in your work, you are aligning your heart with His will and positioning yourself to receive answers that are tailored, timely, and transformation. Intentionality in prayer ensures that your communication with God is effective, that your spirit is tuned to His response, and that your faith is strengthened as you witness His faithful answers manifest in your life. Alignment through intentional prayer also produces peace. When your heart and spirit are centered on God, worry, fear, and anxiety lose their grip on your mind. You begin the day with a sense of calm assurance, knowing that the Creator of all things is guiding your steps, opening doors, and orchestrating your circumstances. This peace is not dependent on the absence of challenges, but on the presence of God in the midst of them. It is a stabilizing force that enables you to navigate the uncertainties of life with confidence, to make decisions with clarity, and to respond to difficulties with grace. When your spirit is aligned with God, peace becomes the natural outcome of your prayer life, and it serves as a testimony of His power and faithfulness to those around you. Finally, intentional prayer is a practice of empowerment. It reminds you that you are not passive in life, but an active participant in the fulfillment of God's purposes. By aligning your heart and spirit through prayer, you take hold of the authority given to you as a child of God. You position yourself to decree, to declare, and to co-labor with heaven in the manifestation of blessings, guidance, and breakthroughs. Prayer connects your faith with action, your spirit with purpose, and your life with destiny. It is through this intentional alignment that your day transforms from ordinary to extraordinary, from uncertain to directed, and from mundane to filled with the presence and power of God. To release every burden and speak life over every situation is a declaration of spiritual authority that sets you free and positions you to experience divine intervention in every area of your life. Life often brings challenges, pressures, and unexpected circumstances that weigh heavily on the heart and mind. These burdens can cloud judgment, drain energy, and dampen the spirit. Yet God's word reminds us that we are not meant to carry these weights alone. When we consciously choose to release every burden into the hands of God, we are acknowledging His power, sovereignty, and willingness to intervene on our behalf. This act of releasing is both liberating and empowering. It allows the Spirit of God to operate unhindered in our lives and opens the door for supernatural solutions to manifest where human effort alone cannot prevail. Speaking life over every situation is rooted in the principle that words are creative forces. Proverbs 18:21 tells us that life and death are in the power of the tongue. Every word we speak carries weight, and every declaration we make has the potential to shape the outcomes around us. When you speak life, you are actively aligning your circumstances with God's truth and His promises. This means taking every situation, whether it appears hopeless, stagnant, or challenging, and intentionally declaring God's favor, provision, peace, and breakthrough over it. To speak life is to refuse to allow negativity, fear, or doubt to dictate the direction of your day. It is a conscious choice to declare what is consistent with God's word rather than what your natural senses might perceive. Releasing burdens begins with honesty before God. It requires acknowledging the stress, anxiety, worry, and pressure that weigh on your heart. When you bring these matters before Him in prayer, you are not simply confessing weakness, you are demonstrating faith. Faith recognizes that God is bigger than any problem, that He is stronger than any challenge, and that His resources are unlimited. As you release your burdens, picture yourself placing them into His hands, trusting that He will handle them with divine precision. This act of surrender not only lightens your load, but also activates spiritual forces that work on your behalf. Angels are dispatched, doors are opened, and solutions begin to unfold in alignment with God's perfect timing. To speak life over situations, it is essential to use the language of faith. Faith-filled words carry authority and have the power to transform circumstances. Instead of dwelling on limitations, difficulties, or obstacles, declare what is true according to God's promise. You might say, "This situation is under your control, Lord. I declare peace, favor, and breakthrough. I speak restoration, provision, and victory into every area that requires your intervention. I refuse to entertain fear or doubt, for I walk in faith and trust in your perfect plan." Such declarations align your spirit with God's power and create a spiritual atmosphere where miracles can occur. Every time you speak life, you are planting seeds of faith that will grow into tangible results, transforming challenges into testimonies and obstacles into opportunities. It is also important to understand that releasing burdens and speaking life is a daily discipline. Life constantly presents new pressures, and the enemy seeks to exploit moments of worry, fear, and doubt. By intentionally dedicating time each day to release these burdens and speak life, you build spiritual resilience. You train your heart to respond in faith rather than fear, to focus on God's promises rather than problems, and to maintain peace regardless of circumstances. This daily practice strengthens your relationship with God, sharpens your spiritual discernment, and equips you to handle challenges with confidence and clarity. It also positions you as a vessel of God's life-giving power in the lives of others, because when your spirit is free and your words are aligned with God, you naturally inspire, encourage, and uplift those around you. Releasing burdens also involves forgiveness, both of others and yourself. Holding on to resentment, guilt, or anger creates spiritual weight that hinders the flow of God's blessings. By choosing to forgive and release past offenses, you remove spiritual blockages and allow God's healing and favor to manifest more fully in your life. This act of releasing is not a sign of weakness, but a demonstration of spiritual maturity and faith. It shows that you trust God to handle justice, restoration, and resolution according to his perfect will. Forgiveness and release pave the way for freedom, restoration, and peace, allowing your words of life to have maximum effect. Another critical aspect of speaking life over every situation is the recognition that you are co-laboring with God. You are not passive in the spiritual process. Your declarations, prayers, and actions participate in the unfolding of God's plans. By speaking life, you actively shape the spiritual environment around you. Challenges that once seemed insurmountable begin to diminish in power. Opportunities arise in unexpected ways, and solutions emerge that defy human logic. This is the supernatural principle of partnership with God. As you align your words and actions with his will, you release the forces of heaven to work in harmony with your faith, producing outcomes that honor him and benefit your life. Faith and patience are essential components of this practice. Some burdens may not be lifted instantly, and some situations may not change overnight. Yet your continued commitment to releasing them into God's hands and speaking life daily demonstrates trust and perseverance. It reinforces your alignment with his timing, his wisdom, and his plan. Persistence in prayer and declaration creates momentum in the spiritual realm, gradually dissolving obstacles, opening doors, and bringing clarity where confusion once reigned. Each day that you release burdens and speak life is a step closer to victory, a step closer to breakthrough, and a step closer to experiencing the fullness of God's blessings. Finally, releasing burdens and speaking life is transformative not only for your circumstances, but also for your inner spirit. When you actively engage in this practice, you experience freedom from fear, anxiety, and despair. Your faith is strengthened, your hope is renewed, and your joy becomes evident. The spiritual transformation radiates outward, impacting your interactions, relationships, and decisions. It also positions you to recognize and receive God's blessings in every form, whether they manifest as peace, provision, guidance, or breakthrough. By consistently releasing burdens and speaking life, you cultivate a lifestyle of victory, a mindset of faith, and a heart fully surrendered to God's power and purposes. To decree divine guidance, protection, and provision for the day ahead is an intentional act of faith that positions you under the favor and authority of God. Each morning presents a new horizon, a blank page on which your day's story will be written. How that story unfolds is deeply influenced by your spiritual posture at the start of the day. When you decree guidance, protection, and provision, you are not leaving your day to chance, nor are you allowing circumstances, fears, or uncertainties to dictate the outcomes. Instead, you are claiming the supernatural oversight and care of a God who knows your needs, understands your challenges, and orchestrates every detail of your life with precision and wisdom. Decreeing guidance is an acknowledgement that you cannot navigate life by your own understanding alone, that your decisions require divine insight, and that your steps need to be ordered according to God's perfect plan. It is a declaration of dependence on Him, a surrender of control, and a commitment to walk in alignment with His purpose. Divine guidance is essential because the path of life is filled with choices, crossroads, and moments of uncertainty. Human wisdom, though valuable, is limited by perspective, experience, and knowledge. But God's guidance transcends these limitations. When you decree His direction over your day, you are inviting His Spirit to illuminate your mind, clarify your decisions, and lead you away from pitfalls and distractions. Guidance is not passive. It is active, continuous, and dynamic. It moves with the unfolding of circumstances, the appearance of new opportunities, and the subtle promptings of the Spirit. Each time you decree divine guidance, you are opening your heart and mind to His supernatural counsel, positioning yourself to make choices that align with His will and bring favor, success, and peace. Protection is another critical aspect of this daily decree. The world is full of unseen forces, challenges, and spiritual attacks that can hinder, delay, or even destroy what God has intended for you. Protection is the supernatural covering that surrounds you, your family, your work, and your possessions, shielding you from harm, danger, and deception. By declaring protection, you are calling upon the power of God to establish a hedge around your life, ensuring that your steps are guarded and your spirit remains unshaken. This protection is not passive or symbolic. It is a living force that operates in the spiritual realm, neutralizing threats, counteracting negativity, and maintaining peace in the midst of chaos. When you decree protection, you are not living in fear. Rather, you are asserting faith, recognizing God's sovereignty, and declaring that no weapon formed against you shall prosper. Provision is the third element of this daily decree and is equally vital. Life presents ongoing needs: spiritual, emotional, financial, relational, and physical. Provision is God's supply that meets these needs, often in ways that exceed expectation and defy human calculation. By decreeing provision, you are aligning your faith with God's promises and activating the supernatural flow of His resources into your life. Provision is not limited to material blessings. It encompasses wisdom, opportunities, relationships, favor, and spiritual strength. When you speak provision over your day, you are calling into existence everything required for you to thrive, succeed, and fulfill your purpose. This is not wishful thinking, but a declaration rooted in the authority given to you as a child of God, empowered by His Spirit to release His promises into your reality. The act of decreeing guidance, protection, and provision requires clarity and authority. It is not merely a passive thought or casual statement. It is a deliberate declaration that carries spiritual weight. When you speak with conviction, your words activate the spiritual laws that govern life, circumstances, and favor. Your declarations become commands to the spiritual realm, instructing angels to guard, lead, and supply in accordance with God's will. Authority and decree comes from understanding your identity in Christ, recognizing that the same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead resides in you, and that you have been given power to bind and loose, to speak life over situations, and to release heaven's resources into your daily experience. Faith is the engine that drives these decrees. Decreeing guidance, protection, and provision requires belief that God is present, active, and able to intervene. Faith releases divine energy into situations and aligns your life with the supernatural principles of God's kingdom. Without faith, decrees are empty words, lacking the spiritual force necessary to effect change. But when faith accompanies your declarations, barriers crumble, obstacles dissolve, and doors open that human effort alone could never create. Faith reinforces your trust in God's ability to lead, guard, and supply, and it establishes your expectation for positive divine outcomes. Consistency in decree is also vital. Every day brings new challenges and new opportunities. By making it a daily practice to decree divine guidance, protection, and provision, you cultivate spiritual discipline that prepares you to handle life with confidence and clarity. Daily decrees align your mind, heart, and spirit with God's will, creating an ongoing atmosphere of favor and supernatural intervention. Repetition strengthens faith, deepens spiritual awareness, and builds momentum in the unseen realm. This spiritual consistency ensures that you are not reactive to circumstances, but proactive in inviting God's power and presence into every facet of your day. Decreeing divine guidance also cultivates discernment. When you intentionally invite God to lead your steps, you develop sensitivity to his voice and awareness of his direction. Discernment allows you to identify opportunities, avoid hazards, and make decisions that honor God and maximize blessings. This spiritual insight is invaluable, especially in times of uncertainty, competition, or pressure. By decreeing guidance, you place yourself in a position to respond to life with wisdom rather than impulse, understanding rather than confusion, and confidence rather than fear. Protection through decree cultivates peace of mind. When you speak protection over your day, over your loved ones, and over your possessions, you create a spiritual buffer that allows you to operate with calm assurance. Peace is not the absence of challenges, but the presence of God's covering. It enables you to navigate situations with composure, make decisions without panic, and maintain focus amidst chaos. Decreeing protection instills confidence in your spirit, reinforcing the truth that God's power is greater than any threat and that his supernatural shield surrounds you in every moment. Provision through decree cultivates expectation. By declaring God's supply over your needs, you anticipate his intervention and trust that he will meet you at the exact point of need. Expectation is a spiritual posture that opens your heart to receive, amplifies your faith, and positions you to recognize blessings as they manifest. When provision is decreed in faith, doors open, resources flow, and solutions appear in ways that surpass human understanding. You become attuned to opportunities, receptive to divine favor, and aligned with the abundance of heaven. Decreeing guidance, protection, and provision is ultimately an act of partnership with God. It recognizes that while he is sovereign, he invites your participation in the unfolding of his will. Your words, declarations, and prayers become instruments through which his plans are activated in your life. This partnership reinforces your spiritual authority, deepens your intimacy with God, and ensures that your day unfolds under his perfect supervision. It transforms ordinary routines into intentional acts of faith, ordinary decisions into guided steps, and ordinary needs into opportunities for supernatural provision. To activate faith for supernatural breakthroughs and answered prayers is to step boldly into the realm of God's power. where the impossible becomes possible and the ordinary transforms into the extraordinary. Faith is not merely a feeling or a hopeful thought. It is a spiritual force that connects your heart, your mind, and your spirit to the limitless power of God. When you intentionally activate faith, you are taking a deliberate stand to trust God, to believe in His promises, and to operate with confidence in His ability to intervene on your behalf. This act of faith positions you to receive what is beyond human understanding, to access divine solutions, and to release the supernatural into every area of your life. Faith is the bridge between your current circumstances and God's provision, between your challenges and God's answers, and between your dreams and their manifestation. Supernatural breakthroughs require more than human effort. They demand a reliance on God's Spirit and a willingness to believe beyond what the eye can see. Breakthroughs often occur at the intersection of faith and persistence. They are moments when God moves in response to the prayers of a believer who refuses to be limited by circumstance. Activating faith for breakthroughs means refusing to accept defeat, refusing to settle for mediocrity, and refusing to allow fear or doubt to dictate your outcomes. It is a declaration that no obstacle, no limitation, and no opposition is greater than the power of God at work in your life. Every prayer spoken in faith becomes a catalyst for change, a spark that ignites supernatural movement, and a declaration that you are positioned to walk into victory regardless of what the natural world may suggest. Expectation faith, you must first cultivate an expectation of God's intervention. Expectation is a spiritual posture that opens the door for miracles to manifest. It requires that you speak with confidence, declare with authority, and anticipate results that align with God's promises. Expectation removes doubt and replaces it with certainty, creating a spiritual atmosphere where answers can take shape. When you approach prayer with a heart fully expecting God to move, you are demonstrating trust in His timing, His wisdom, and His power. This expectation is not passive, it is active, persistent, and unwavering. It fuels the intensity of your prayers, reinforces the authority of your declarations, and amplifies the spiritual force of your faith. Activation of faith also involves declaring the promises of God over your life and circumstances. God's word is alive and powerful, and it contains specific assurances that equip you to face every challenge with courage and confidence. By speaking scripture in faith, you are aligning your spirit with God's eternal truth and releasing divine energy into your situation. For example, declaring promises of provision, protection, healing, guidance, and favor activates the spiritual principles embedded within those promises. Each declaration, spoken with authority and conviction, serves as a spiritual lever that releases the power of God to manifest in your life. Faith-filled words do not merely express hope, they invoke action in the unseen realm, commanding the alignment of circumstances with God's will. Prayer is the channel through which faith operates. When you pray with intention and activate faith in every word, your prayers move beyond routine recitation into a spiritual exchange that releases supernatural power. This requires focus, clarity, and unwavering belief that God is able to respond. Each prayer becomes an act of partnership with heaven, a declaration that your life is not subject to randomness, but is under divine orchestration. The power of prayer is magnified when faith accompanies it, because faith amplifies the spiritual resonance of your words, enabling heaven to respond to your petitions and to open doors that human effort alone cannot open. Supernatural breakthroughs often require persistence. Faith is strengthened when it is exercised over time, when it continues despite apparent delays, and when it refuses to be discouraged by challenges. Many believers abandon their prayers prematurely because the answers do not arrive according to human timing or expectation. Yet God's timing is perfect, and breakthroughs frequently occur after seasons of persistent faith. Activating faith for answered prayers means remaining steadfast, continuing to speak life and hope into your situation, and trusting that God is working behind the scenes even when immediate results are not visible. Each act of persistent faith builds momentum in the spiritual realm, gradually displacing obstacles, dismantling opposition, and creating pathways for divine intervention. Another vital aspect of activating faith is surrender. Faith requires that you release control over outcomes, trusting God to act in accordance with His perfect will. Surrender does not mean passivity or resignation. It means that your confidence is in God's wisdom, power, and timing rather than in your own efforts or understanding. By surrendering in faith, you allow God's Spirit to orchestrate events, coordinate circumstances, and align people in ways that maximize the impact of His intervention. This surrender creates a spiritual alignment that is essential for breakthroughs to occur, because it allows God to work unhindered without resistance from fear, doubt, or self-reliance. Faith is also relational. Activating faith requires intimacy with God, a relationship built on trust, obedience, and communication. The closer you are to God, the stronger your faith becomes. Regular prayer, study of His Word, and attentive listening to His Spirit cultivate this intimacy. As your relation with God deepens, your faith grows more resilient, your trust becomes unshakable, and your confidence in His ability to answer prayers reaches new heights. Faith is not a generic belief in a distant deity. It is a personal, vibrant connection with a loving Father who desires to intervene in every detail of your life. Activating faith for supernatural breakthroughs also involves speaking life over circumstances that appear impossible. When faced with challenges, declaring God's promises with authority and expectation signals to the spiritual realm that you refuse to accept limitation. These declarations are spiritual commands that align your environment, opportunities, and relationships with God's will. Each spoken word carries power, and when faith undergirds those words, the supernatural becomes engaged. Mountains of difficulty begin to shift. Solutions appear where none were visible, and doors previously closed open suddenly and unexpectedly. Faith activates the supernatural principle that God's power is not limited by human logic, timing, or understanding. Finally, activating faith positions you as a co-laborer with heaven. You are not passive in the manifestation of miracles and breakthroughs. Your faith, declarations, and prayers are instruments through which God's power operates. By activating faith daily, you are claiming authority over situations, inviting God's intervention, and expecting answers that honor His promises. Your faith becomes the channel through which blessings flow, breakthroughs occur, and the impossible becomes reality. It transforms ordinary prayers into life-changing declarations, ordinary circumstances into testimonies, and ordinary moments into opportunities for divine manifestation. To end your prayer with gratitude, trusting God for His perfect plan, is to close your time of communion with a posture that invites blessing, peace, and divine fulfillment into every area of your life. Gratitude is more than a polite acknowledgement. It is a spiritual principle that opens your heart to receive from God, aligns your spirit with His goodness, and strengthens your faith in His promises. When you cultivate gratitude at the conclusion of your prayer, you are declaring that regardless of circumstances, you trust God's wisdom, sovereignty, and timing. This act of thanksgiving shifts your focus from limitations to possibilities, from challenges to opportunities, and from what is missing to what has already been provided. Gratitude releases spiritual energy that transforms ordinary circumstances into fertile ground for divine intervention, favor, and breakthroughs. Trusting God for His perfect plan requires surrender. Surrender is a recognition that while you may have your own ideas, timelines, and expectations, God's plan is higher, more precise, and perfectly orchestrated for your ultimate good. Ending your prayer in trust is an affirmation that you believe his wisdom surpasses your understanding and that his timing is impeccable. Trust is not passive, it is active confidence. It is the choice to believe that every situation, every decision, and every challenge is under the divine supervision of a loving God who knows the beginning, middle, and end of your story. By trusting God, you are allowing him to operate freely, removing doubt and resistance that can hinder the flow of his blessings and guidance in your life. Gratitude in prayer also produces spiritual alignment. When you express thanks, your heart is positioned to recognize the goodness of God. Your mind is open to the awareness of his faithfulness, and your spirit resonates with his presence. This alignment strengthens your spiritual sensitivity, allowing you to perceive divine guidance, opportunities, and answers more clearly. Gratitude is a magnet for favor, an amplifier of faith, and a channel through which God's blessings flow abundantly. It prepares your heart to receive more than you ask or imagine, creating a fertile environment for miracles and breakthroughs to manifest. Expressing gratitude at the conclusion of prayer reinforces your faith. Faith and gratitude are interconnected. Faith believes, while gratitude affirms the reality of God's promises. When you end your prayer with thanksgiving, you are reinforcing the truth that God is able, that he is faithful, and that his plans for you are designed for blessing, growth, and fulfillment. This act of gratitude strengthens your trust, deepens your confidence, and solidifies your expectation for the answers to your prayers. It positions you to enter the day with a spirit of optimism, courage, and resilience, knowing that God's plan is unfolding on your behalf, even when it is not immediately visible. Trusting God for his perfect plan also encourages patience and perseverance. Life often presents delays, obstacles, and situations that appear contrary to what we desire or expect. Trust allows you to navigate these moments without despair or frustration, knowing that God's timing is perfect and that his outcomes are always for your good. By ending your prayer with trust, you cultivate the spiritual resilience needed to maintain hope, stay faithful in action, and continue moving forward even when circumstances seem challenging. Patience becomes a natural byproduct of trust, and perseverance becomes a reflection of your unwavering belief in God's sovereign plan. Gratitude also transforms your perspective. When you end your prayer with a thankful heart, you are consciously choosing to focus on blessings rather than burdens, on solutions rather than problems, and on God's provision rather than scarcity. This shift in perspective is powerful because it affects not only your spiritual atmosphere, but also your mental, emotional, and physical well-being. Gratitude reshapes your thinking, elevates your spirit, and fosters a positive outlook that attracts further blessings and opportunities. By consistently closing your prayers with gratitude, you develop a lifestyle of thanksgiving that permeates every aspect of your life, enhancing your ability to see God's hand at work in all things. Trusting God in prayer also strengthens your spiritual authority. When you express gratitude and rely on his perfect plan, you are demonstrating faith, obedience, and alignment with God's will. This positions you to exercise authority in prayer, declaration, and decree with confidence, knowing that your actions are in harmony with heaven's purposes. Gratitude and trust are not passive responses. They are active expressions of spiritual power that invite God's intervention, protection, and provision into your life. Each time you end your prayer with thanksgiving, you reinforce your connection to the supernatural, activating divine resources and aligning your day with God's favor. Additionally, ending in gratitude enhances your relational intimacy with God. Prayer is a dialogue, a communion, and a partnership with the Creator of all things. When you conclude with gratitude, you are not merely finishing a routine. You are deepening your relationship, acknowledging God's ongoing work, and expressing love and appreciation for his presence in your life. Gratitude opens your heart to experience God's peace, joy, and guidance more fully. It shifts prayer from a transactional activity to a relational encounter, fostering closeness, trust, and spiritual sensitivity. The more your heart is grateful, the more attuned you become to the voice and movement of God in your life. Ending prayer with gratitude also cultivates hope. Hope is the confident expectation of God's promises being fulfilled in your life. By expressing thanks for his perfect plan, you reinforce the truth that God is working on your behalf, even when results are not immediately visible. Hope strengthens your resilience, fuels your faith, and sustains you through periods of waiting or challenge. Gratitude and hope work together to create a spiritual posture that is expectant, optimistic, and aligned with the reality of God's power. This posture ensures that your life is not dictated by fear, doubt, or discouragement, but by the confident trust in a loving God who orchestrates every detail for your benefit. Moreover, ending prayer in gratitude encourages generosity of spirit. When you recognize and thank God for his goodness, you are reminded of the abundance in your life, inspiring you to bless, encourage, and uplift others. Gratitude creates a ripple effect, transforming not only your spiritual and emotional state, but also influencing those around you positively. By living a life of gratitude, you become a vessel of God's love, favor, and blessing, demonstrating the transformative power of thankfulness in action. Finally, concluding prayer with gratitude and trust reinforces a mindset of alignment with God's will. It affirms that your life, your decisions, and your circumstances are under his guidance. It ensures that your heart is receptive to his answers, your spirit is open to his direction, and your faith is strengthened for ongoing breakthrough. Gratitude and trust create a foundation for a day filled with peace, divine favor, protection, and provision, positioning you to walk in victory, purpose, and the fullness of God's promises.